She was sad for not kissing anyone on New Year's Eve. So the CEO's mother whispered, "Kiss my son." While everyone else kissed at midnight, she stood alone by the balcony, holding a plastic cup and pretending it didn't hurt. The lights of the city sparkled behind her like a stage she didn't belong to. No one noticed she hadn't been invited to a single photo. No one asked if she was okay, until a woman, elegant, warm, older, leaned in close and whispered something that would change everything. "Kiss my son." And just like that, the loneliest New Year's Eve of her life became the beginning of a story she'd never forget. Before we continue, if you enjoy touching and inspiring stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Now, let's get back to the story. "He wouldn't notice you if you were the last woman in Manhattan," someone whispered behind her, soft enough to sting, loud enough to hear. Layla Hartman didn't flinch. She just smiled gently at her plastic cup of sparkling cider and turned a little more toward the window, pretending the glittering skyline outside the ballroom was more interesting than the couples slowly circling the dance floor. Somewhere behind her, laughter swirled like confetti, careless, beautiful, and definitely not meant for her. It was almost midnight. She had made it through the evening invisible, which, until 5 minutes ago, had felt like a blessing. Now it just felt like confirmation. Another party, another year, another night where no one noticed the woman in the silver dress standing quietly near the dessert table. Her fingers curled slightly around the small, round pendant at her neck. Her mother's. She used to say, "Wear this when you need to feel brave." Brave for what, though? Being ignored? Smiling politely when the marketing interns compared lipsticks and laughed about Tinder disasters? Lila wasn't even on dating apps. She didn't trust them. She still believed in real connection. Eyes meeting across a crowded room, fingertips grazing accidentally, laughter over coffee that made you forget your phone on the table. She also believed she'd waited too long for it. She glanced around the ballroom, and that's when she saw him. Dorian Vale, CEO of Vale International. Black tuxedo, silver pocket square, almost the exact same shade as her dress, which she hadn't noticed until now. Tall, striking, unreadable. He was surrounded by executives, laughing at something, but his eyes weren't in the joke. They scanned the room slowly, like they were looking for something else. Lila dropped her gaze, heart stumbling. She took a small sip of cider and immediately coughed, too fast, too sharp. A little spray of bubbles hit her wrist. Great. Now her cardigan sleeve was sticky. She fumbled for a napkin just as the lights dimmed for the countdown. 10. Someone knocked into her shoulder, not rudely, just as if she weren't there. 9. Everywhere around her, people turned to kiss their partners. Some leaned in already. Others waited like they were about to be swept into something magical. 8. Lila felt the burn behind her eyes before she could stop it. 7. She blinked quickly, forced herself to breathe, to stand still. 6. She wouldn't cry. 5. She was used to this. 4. The world around her shimmered in champagne, laughter, silk, and perfume. 3. Her hands tightened around her cup. 2. Her heart whispered, "Please, not again." 1. Fireworks exploded outside the windows. Balloons fell from the ceiling. Couples kissed. Lila smiled weakly, pretending to sip, pretending not to notice how alone she looked, standing under a chandelier that reflected every tear she refused to shed. But someone noticed, not him, his mother. A woman with graceful silver blonde hair and a champagne-colored gown appeared beside her with a smile that made Lila feel seen, like sunlight after days of rain. "I'm Helena," the woman said gently, brushing a balloon off Lila's shoulder. "My son owns this chaos." Lila blinked. "It's a lovely event," she replied, her voice a little steadier than her chest. "I've been watching you all evening," Helena continued, not unkindly. "You move like someone trying not to leave footprints." Lila laughed. Just a small sound, a little breath of surprise. I'm just in marketing, she offered, suddenly aware of how young her voice sounded next to this woman's elegance. I didn't want to take up space. Helena tilted her head, amused. Darling, you are the space people should be making. Lila smiled, unsure what to say to that. Then Helena leaned in, warm and conspiratorial, and whispered the words that would change everything. Kiss my son. Lila froze. What? Don't look, Helena said, amused. But he's been glancing your way for the past 10 minutes. He's too proud to cross the room without a reason. Lila's throat tightened. That can't be true. I raised him. I know that look. He's intrigued but cautious. He doesn't chase what he thinks he can't catch. Lila laughed awkwardly. I'm not exactly the kind of woman men chase at galas. Then you're exactly the kind he should notice. Helena gently touched the pendant at Lila's neck, the one that had belonged to her mother. Her fingers were soft, her eyes kind. Do you know what that necklace says about you? Lila shook her head. It says you believe in something deeper and you carry someone's love close to your heart. And just like that, something cracked inside her. Not broken, just loosened. Like a door that hadn't been opened in a long time, finally letting in a bit of air. Helena smiled. Go on, he's by the terrace doors. I'll make sure no one interrupts. Lila turned, heart hammering, and there he was, Dorian Vale, standing alone, champagne glass in hand, looking out at the fireworks. He hadn't moved toward anyone. He hadn't kissed anyone. He stood still, quiet, as though waiting for something or someone. The pendant felt warm against her skin, and for the first time all night, Lila didn't feel invisible. She took a deep breath. One step, then another, across the golden floor of the Vale ballroom. But just before she reached him, just before she could say anything, a tall woman in crimson stepped smoothly in front of her, wrapped her arm around his and whispered something in his ear that made him smile. Lila stopped. She was 3 feet away, close enough to hear the laughter, not close enough to matter. She turned quietly, pretending not to notice the way her throat burned, the way the pendant suddenly felt like weight instead of warmth. Back at her table, she reached for her purse with trembling fingers and paused. A folded linen napkin sat tucked just beneath her phone, neat, unexpected, and far too intentional to be a mistake. Inside it, in careful cursive, was a note. Don't let that be the end of your story. H. Sure. Lila didn't sleep much that night. She kept replaying the moment she read that note. The napkin had been folded carefully, no smudges, no lipstick marks, just clean linen, and that one line, don't let that be the end of your story. H. She'd tucked it into her coat pocket like something sacred. She still didn't know what had shaken her more, Dorian Vale smiling at another woman, or his mother's quiet faith in her. A complete stranger in a silver dress with sparkling cider stains on her sleeve. By morning, the party felt like a half-remembered dream, too golden to be real, too painful to forget. She tied her hair into a loose bun, tucked her pendant under her sweater, and went to work like it was any other Tuesday. No one at the marketing department mentioned the gala. Everyone was too tired, too busy, or too focused on the year's first morning meeting. Lila liked it that way, but at 10:13 a.m., everything shifted again. Lila Hartman, a voice called from the glass doorway of the common workspace. Heads turned. Lila looked up from her screen, surprised to see Helena Vale, not in a gown this time, but in an elegant cream coat and a soft green scarf. The same warmth in her smile, the same confidence in her presence. Oh, yes. Lila stood, feeling every curious glance around her. Helena held up a to-go tray with 2 coffees. You walked away too quickly last night. I brought a peace offering. Lila blinked. You came to the office? I have meetings upstairs, Helena said casually. But I thought I'd borrow you first, just 15 minutes. The woman could have said, I'm here to change the course of your entire life, and Lila probably would have followed her just the same. A moment later, they were seated on a bench just outside the building, the January air crisp but bearable under a clear sky. Lila clutched the warm cup between her hands, still a little unsure if this was real. "You're wondering if I always chase people down after parties," Helena said with a twinkle. "I wasn't exactly wondering that," Lila replied, smiling despite herself. "I do, in fact," Helena said, "but only when I see something rare. You stood there like the party wasn't made for you. And yet, you carried yourself like you belonged anyway. That's not common." "I didn't feel like I belonged." "That's because you were surrounded by people pretending harder than you." Lila stared into her coffee. "I saw him smile at her." Helena tilted her head. "You think a polite smile ends the story?" "I think I was foolish for even walking toward him." "Lila," she said gently, "the only foolish thing you could do is convince yourself you're not worthy of being seen." Lila didn't reply. She just watched the steam rise from her cup and wrapped both hands around it like an anchor. Helena took a sip from her own coffee and looked out toward the quiet city street. "Dorian doesn't date lightly," she said. "He's wary of people who want something from him." "I'm not trying to." "I know," Helena smiled. "That's why I like you." Lila felt the pendant against her skin again, tucked just under the collar of her sweater. She hadn't planned to wear it today. She almost left it in the drawer, afraid it would remind her too much of last night. But something about Helena's words, and the way she had touched it with such care, made her slip it on again this morning, like armor she didn't know she needed. Helena leaned back. "I'm not matchmaking, you know." Lila raised an eyebrow. "Well, maybe a little." Her grin softened. "But mostly I'm offering you something most people don't get. Permission to try." Lila let that sink in. They sat in silence for a while, sipping coffee like old friends who had just met. It was a strange kind of peace, but a welcome one. "Will I see you again?" Lila asked before she could stop herself. "Oh, I imagine you'll see a great deal of me," Helena said, standing with a graceful stretch. "I have a seat on the foundation board, and you, dear, have just been assigned to the rebranding campaign." "I have?" She winked. "Official memo comes tomorrow." I pulled a few strings. Lila laughed. A real laugh this time, short and bright. Helena leaned down slightly, eyes sparkling. "And if my son asks who wrote the note, tell him I didn't." Lila blinked. "Wait, you didn't?" Helena just walked away with a mysterious smile, leaving Lila sitting on the bench holding her coffee and the warm thread of a brand new question. If Helena didn't write the note, who did? Dorian Vale had a gift for pretending not to notice things. It was a habit he'd picked up over a decade of boardrooms and quiet betrayals. The sharper the suit, the quieter the lie. That was the rule. And lately everyone wanted something. A contract, a raise, a favor, a photograph at the gala. He noticed that too, especially the woman who had wrapped herself around his arm just after midnight. Camille de Brunt, socialite, friend of the family, friend of the press. The moment had meant nothing, but the woman in silver who had turned away? That had stayed with him all night. He didn't know her name, only that her hair caught the chandelier light like something out of a storybook, and that she'd walked toward him with a kind of brave hesitation that made him forget the noise around him. Until she'd stopped, until she'd vanished. Now, 2 days later, he found himself standing near the glass railing on the 12th floor of Vale International, holding a black coffee he didn't want, pretending to read emails he'd already read, waiting for something unspoken. "Sir," his assistant said, poking his head in, "marketing's in the South Conference Room. They're prepping for the brand refresh pitch." Dorian didn't usually attend mid-tier planning meetings, but today he went. He told himself it was because the rebranding tied into foundation messaging and public relations. But as he stepped into the room and saw her, Lila Hartman, seated near the far end with a notebook and pen in hand. He knew better. She looked different in the daylight, less like a fairy tale and more like something steady, like warmth in the middle of winter. Across the table, Grace Holloway from the copy team glanced at Lila, professional, polite, and distant in a way that wasn't quite friendship. Something in her expression hinted at quiet frustration, though Lila couldn't tell why. Lila remembered a moment from weeks earlier, Grace passing her in the break room with a too-sweet smile, calling her princess. In a tone that hadn't felt like a compliment, she glanced up, surprised, when he entered. Their eyes met for only half a second, just long enough for her to blink and look away like she'd been caught staring at the sun. He took a seat near the head of the table, but didn't speak. He just watched. Lila kept her focus on the screen as the lead strategist spoke, but he noticed her hands. Nervous, quiet, always in motion, turning her pen, adjusting her sleeve, once brushing the chain of a small necklace beneath her collar. He knew that pendant. He remembered it from the gala, a delicate round charm, silver, softly catching light. The kind of thing you wore when it meant something. The kind of thing someone had given you with love. That detail undid him more than he expected. Halfway through the meeting, someone brought in lunch, boxed salads and flatbreads, the usual corporate fare. Lila stood to help distribute them without being asked. "She always does that," someone whispered nearby. "She's too nice for this place." Dorian didn't react, but when she reached him, he looked up and held her gaze for the second time. "Thank you," he said. Not in the way CEOs say thank you, but in the way men say it when they mean it. Lila smiled softly. "Of course." Her voice was gentler than he remembered. Or maybe he'd never heard it at all until now. As the room buzzed around them, he took his lunch and noticed a folded napkin on top. Linen. Not company stock. A coincidence? No. She blushed. Barely. And moved away to hand out the rest. He unfolded it. Nothing inside this time. No note, no writing. Just the weight of a memory. And the realization that somehow, without exchanging a single meaningful word, they now shared a secret. The meeting dragged on, but he barely listened. His mind stayed fixed on her, the way she leaned slightly forward when someone else spoke, the quiet nods, the thoughtful silence. She didn't perform like the others. She didn't try to be seen, which made her impossible to ignore. After the meeting, he found himself walking beside her in the hallway, not by design, but by momentum. "That was a thoughtful addition," he said quietly. She looked up. "Sorry?" "The napkin." A pause. She smiled faintly. "Habit, I guess. I like the linen ones. They feel more intentional." He nodded. "Your mother has excellent taste," she added quickly, "in coffee and scarves." That made him smile. Barely, but it was there. "She mentioned she ran into you." Lila's steps slowed just slightly. "She also said she didn't write the note." Dorian stopped. "What note?" She blinked. "Never mind." He turned to face her. "No." "What note?" Her throat caught. It was tucked into a napkin, after the gala, just one line, nothing big." "What did it say?" Lila hesitated, but something in his expression, steady, curious, unexpectedly open, made her say it aloud. "Don't let that be the end of your story." Dorian's face didn't change, but his silence stretched for half a beat longer than it should have. "I didn't write it," he said finally. Lila looked down. "I didn't think you did." But he was still staring at her, not dismissively, not amused, just quietly. "You looked familiar that night," he said, more to himself than to her. "I couldn't place it." "I've worked here for almost 2 years." "No, that's not it." She looked up. "You looked like someone I'd remember." Lila's heart stopped, and just as she tried to find something, anything, to say in return, the elevator dinged behind them. A woman stepped out. Red coat, black heels, Camille Debrant. She barely glanced at Lila before walking straight up to Dorian, wrapping an arm around his and greeting him with a kiss on the cheek, far too familiar to be casual. Lila stepped back instinctively, Tom, as if cold air had suddenly found her again. Dorian didn't speak, but he didn't pull away either. Camille turned to Lila and offered a smile so polished it felt rehearsed. "I'm sorry. Are you in events or admin?" Lila opened her mouth, but the words stuck. Lila stood frozen for a moment, her breath caught between offense and disbelief. "Are you in events or admin?" The words had floated out of Camille's mouth like perfume, sweet but designed to linger and sting. Lila blinked, her lips parting just slightly, not in confusion, but in restraint. Before she could answer, Dorian turned to Camille. "She's part of the rebranding team." Camille arched a perfect brow. "Oh, I hadn't realized the refresh included marketing juniors." Lila smiled, not broadly, not defensively, just enough to feel in control. "I'm actually one of the lead brand writers," she said quietly. "I'll be scripting the Foundation's new campaign, including the press language you'll probably be quoting." The hallway shifted. Dorian said nothing, but she caught the flicker in his expression, a mix of amusement and something almost like pride. Camille's face didn't move, not even a blink. How charming. With that, she turned her attention fully to Dorian. "I need you for 5 minutes. The museum gala wants a photo for the donor spread." She didn't wait for permission. Just pulled him with her, already halfway into her next sentence. Lila watched them disappear down the corridor, Camille's heels tapping in crisp rhythm, and let out a slow breath, only when they were gone. Her heart thudded. Not from jealousy, exactly. It was something older than that, something raw. That quiet ache of being mistaken for someone forgettable, and the ache of knowing it might not have been a mistake. She didn't go back to her desk. Instead, she slipped away to the rooftop garden, one of the quietest corners of the building. Almost no one used it in the winter. She sat on the bench with her hands in her coat pockets, head tilted back toward the gray sky, trying to steady the emotion swirling inside her. She pulled out her pendant, the one her mother gave her, and let it rest in her palm like an anchor. She whispered, "Am I really still doing this? Letting people make me feel small?" The wind didn't answer. But someone else did. "Well, I certainly hope not." Lila turned, startled. Helena Vale was standing just behind the bench, a paper bag in one hand, scarf trailing softly in the breeze. "Is this your favorite thinking spot too?" she asked, sitting beside her without waiting for an invitation. Lila managed a tired smile. "Only on days when I need to feel invisible." Helena handed her the bag. "Then it's a good thing I brought soup." Inside was a small container of creamy potato leek, still warm, with a fresh brioche roll wrapped in wax paper. The smell alone was enough to draw emotion to the back of Lila's throat. "I can't believe you remembered what I said at coffee," she murmured. "I can't believe you stood there so gracefully after that woman tried to shrink you." Lila stirred the soup, quiet. "She's beautiful and confident and clearly familiar." Helena tilted her head. "Camille grew up around this world. She learned early that if you can't be kind, you can at least be impressive." Lila gave a soft, dry laugh. "You know," Helena added, "when I first married into the Vale family, people whispered things behind my back too." "You?" Helena nodded. "I was a florist's daughter. I'd never been to Switzerland. I didn't drink French reds, and I certainly didn't wear Chanel. But I married a man who saw me for who I was, and that changed everything." Lila looked down at the soup. "It's hard to be in a room full of people who act like you don't exist. That's because they don't know how to see someone who doesn't beg for attention." Helena reached over gently, brushing a small thread from Lila's sleeve, like a mother might. "You carry yourself like someone who's never needed permission to be dignified. That threatens people more than you think." They ate in silence for a while, Warm soup, cold sky, and something healing between them. Then Helena reached into her purse and pulled out something small, a folded square of parchment. Lila blinked. Another note? "This one's mine," Helena said with a wink. "But I didn't leave the first." "You really didn't?" "No," she smiled, "though I wish I had." Lila opened the paper slowly. It read, "You don't belong in the background. Stop acting like you do." Lila folded it back with trembling fingers. When she looked up, Helena was watching her closely. "I think," Helena said softly, "this story of yours isn't about a man choosing you. It's about you choosing yourself. And once you do, well, the rest tends to follow." Lila nodded, emotion catching in her throat. Helena stood. "I have to get back to my life of intimidating board members and secretly judging red carpet dresses." Lila laughed. Not politely, but fully. "Thank you," Helena paused. "One last thing. Camille's not his girlfriend." Layla blinked. "She wants to be," Helena added, "but Dorian hasn't let anyone close in a very long time. Not really." And with that, she left. Lila sat alone for a few minutes, heart lighter, hand still warm from soup. When she returned to her desk, there was an envelope waiting. No name, just her title, Brand Copy Lead, written in familiar, sharp handwriting. Inside was a mock-up of a draft campaign proposal scrawled with notes in red ink. One note was circled twice. "Rewrite this? It's too cold. Make it sound like something she'd actually say." And beneath it, just 2 words, scribbled sideways in the margin. "You matter." Her breath caught. She didn't have to ask who left it, because just outside the office, through the frosted glass pane, she saw Dorian Vale walking away. And this time, he looked back. It started with an email, a calendar invite. Actually, for an informal team check-in with Camille Debrun. Lila stared at it for a long moment. Camille wasn't on the branding team, she wasn't even officially part of Vale International, but her name carried weight. And when someone like that requested your time, you didn't decline. The invite came with no agenda. Just a location, 12th floor, West Conference Room, 30 minutes. Today, Lila arrived exactly 2 minutes early, heart pounding. She wore a soft navy blouse and her usual black slacks. Safe, professional, unremarkable. She thought about adding lipstick. She didn't. Camille was already inside. Seated like she owned the glass-walled space, legs crossed, sipping something iced and expensive-looking. The window light hit her perfectly, of course. "Lila," she said smoothly. "Thank you for making time." Lila offered a polite smile. "Of course." "What's this about?" Camille gestured toward the seat across from her. "We're revisiting the tone of the Foundation's public-facing language. I'd love your creative insight." Lila sat, wary. "All right." Camille slid a folder toward her. "There's concern your campaign voice feels a little sentimental. And while I understand your style is gentle, we need messaging that commands respect." Not sympathy. Lila opened the folder. Inside were annotated mock-ups of her writing, phrases circled, crossed out, followed by comments in neat, dismissive handwriting. Too emotional. Reads like a diary entry. Unfit for CEO-tier narrative. Camille smiled gently. "You have a beautiful tone." "Lila, but we don't want donors weeping. We want them impressed." Lila closed the folder slowly. Her pendant shifted slightly against her blouse, just enough to feel present. "I appreciate the feedback," she said, steadying her voice, "but Dorian approved the direction himself." Camille's eyes narrowed ever so slightly. "He's very generous with people he favors. Doesn't mean he won't change course." Lila's stomach twisted, but she held her ground. "I think the campaign should feel human. Empathy isn't weakness, it's connection." "Sweet," Camille murmured, "but this isn't a journal, it's a global foundation." Lila rose before she said something she'd regret. "I'll take your notes under consideration," she said simply. Camille leaned back. Thank you, darling. I always admire grace in young women, so rare these days. Lila didn't answer. She just left, her hands shaking, but her spine straight. Downstairs, the break room was quiet. Just one intern heating soup and someone microwaving day-old salmon. Leela poured herself tea and leaned against the counter, willing her pulse to slow. The pendant against her chest felt like a steady rhythm. She didn't hear him walk in. "Is it awful?" Dorian's voice, low and unexpectedly gentle. Leela turned, startled. "Sorry?" "The tea," he said, motioning toward her cup. "It smells like despair." A laugh escaped her before she could stop it. "It's peppermint," she said, "for nerves." He leaned on the counter beside her, not too close, just enough that she could feel the space shift. "You had a meeting with Camille," he said casually. Lila hesitated. "That obvious?" He tilted his head. "She only uses that room when she's trying to unsettle someone." "I'm fine," Lila said quickly, sipping her tea. "You're not." She looked up, eyes meeting his. He didn't press, but he didn't look away either. "She said my writing was too sentimental," Lila murmured, "that it wouldn't impress anyone." Dorian's voice came quiet, but firm. "Camille confuses coldness with power. It's a mistake a lot of people make." Leela swallowed hard. "Thank you, but it's fine. I've had worse." He glanced at her pendant, barely visible above her neckline. "That necklace," he said, voice softer. "It's always the same one." She touched it instinctively. "It was my mother's. She wore it every day. She's still with you." Lila shook her head. "Not since I was 19. I'm sorry. She always said I'd do something meaningful one day." Lila smiled faintly. "Sometimes I wonder if writing about other people's impact even counts." He studied her, not in a way that made her shrink, but in a way that made her feel real. "It does," he said, "more than you think." And then, because the universe apparently demanded it, her phone buzzed. Loudly, in her coat pocket. She fumbled for it, and as she pulled it out, the screen was still open to an email draft she hadn't sent, or meant to write. Dorian glanced down just in time to see her name, followed by the subject line, "Things I would never say in a meeting, but want to." She turned the screen away quickly, blushing crimson. "Oh no," he raised a brow. "That was a bold subject line." "It's not what it sounds like." "I kind of hope it is," she laughed again. Hand over her face. "Please pretend you never saw that." "I'm very good at pretending," he said, but he was smiling. A silence settled, not awkward, but full. Then he straightened. "I'd like you to write something," he said, "something personal, for the speech I'm giving at the Foundation's Spring Gala." Lila blinked. "I thought your speeches were, impressively empty," he offered. She smiled. "You said it. I want something different this year, honest, from the heart." "From your heart?" she asked, surprised. His eyes didn't waver. "From yours?" The room felt suddenly too quiet, too charged. "Are you sure?" she whispered. "I'm not in the habit of asking people to do things I don't believe they can do." Lila looked down, overwhelmed by the quiet weight of that sentence. When she looked up again, he was gone. She took a breath, steadied her hands, and as she turned to leave, her phone buzzed once more, this time with a forwarded email. From Camille. Subject line, FYI. Not everyone is a fit for public representation. Underneath, a link to an internal photo folder, one image highlighted, Leela. Standing alone on the rooftop, holding soup, hair windswept, face bare. The caption underneath, too soft for the face of a billion-dollar name? And beneath it, her name. In bold, as if she were the punchline to a private joke. Camille had miscalculated, and too late her stage no longer held any light for her. The moment Lila saw the photo, her photo, she felt two things at once, the sting of exposure and the burn of disbelief. Not because it was cruel, because it was calculated. The image was unflattering by design, Wind-swept hair, cardigan slipping off one shoulder, soup container in her lap like some tragic metaphor. It wasn't the picture itself that hurt. It was the caption. Too soft for the face of a billion-dollar name? It hadn't been sent to her directly. Camille had forwarded it to 2 senior VPs and CC'd a foundation board member, and whether it was an accident or perfectly intentional, the message was clear. This girl doesn't belong here. Lila sat frozen in her chair reading it twice, then again. Then she stood. She didn't cry. She didn't respond. She didn't send a passive-aggressive reply or forward it to HR. She walked to the elevator, pressed the button, and took it straight to the 11th floor, the floor no one ever visited unless they had influence or invitation. When she stepped into the private lounge, Helena Vale was there, sipping rose tea and skimming through an art catalog. "Ah," Helena said, looking up with a smile. "I was wondering when I'd see you today." Lila handed her the phone, open to the email. Helena's smile vanished. She read it, once, then slowly looked up. "She sent this to board members?" Her voice was calm, which somehow made it worse. "Yes." Helena took a breath. "You know I can have her removed from every guest list from here to Milan, don't you?" "I don't want that," Lila said softly. "I just thought you should see it." Helena studied her. "You're not here to retaliate." "No. You're here to reclaim your place." Lila didn't answer. She didn't need to. Helena set down her tea, picked up her phone, and typed a message in silence. Her expression didn't flicker. "You'll have a response by morning," she said simply. "Not from me. From the Foundation's official platform, and it won't mention her by name." That would be giving her exactly what she wants. Lila hesitated. "What will it say?" Helena met her gaze. "It'll feature a spotlight on the campaign's writer and a candid photograph." Lila blinked. "Of who?" Helena smiled. "Of a woman who looks thoughtful, windswept, with a soup container in her lap, the kind of woman people don't forget." That night, Lila didn't go home immediately. She sat in the quiet cafe 2 blocks from the office, a little place with string lights in the window and chipped wooden tables that made everything feel more human. She ordered soup again, this time by choice, potato leek. As she stirred it slowly, someone slid into the seat across from her. She looked up. Dorian, no suit tonight. Just a charcoal sweater, coat open, no tie. Somehow it made him look more powerful, like someone who didn't need to impress anyone. "I heard about the email," he said. Lila froze. "You did?" "I didn't see the photo, but I saw the board's reaction. And they weren't amused." Lila gave a dry laugh. "I think that's the point. I wasn't meant to amuse them." He leaned forward. "You weren't meant to disappear either." She looked down at her soup. "Do you think I'm too soft for this place?" "No," he said quietly. "I think this place is too sharp for people who still have hearts." She glanced up. "So what now?" Dorian hesitated, then reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small folded sheet, the kind used for handwritten speeches. He placed it on the table. She didn't open it. "Is this your spring gala speech?" she asked. "No," he said. "It's yours? A copy of what you wrote for the draft campaign. I read it this morning, and I realized I don't want you writing my voice." Lila's chest tightened. "You don't. I want you owning yours." He looked straight at her. "Say what needs to be said, as yourself, not filtered through what you think I want." Lila swallowed hard. "But you're the face of this." "No," he said. "I've been the face for too long. What people need is someone who sounds like a person. Someone who reminds them this place isn't just numbers and suits." She smiled, a full, quiet smile. "That sounds dangerously close to trusting me." "I do." A pause, then softly he added, "More than I probably should." The air between them changed. Her fingers brushed the pendant at her collar. He noticed. "She gave you that," he said. Lila nodded. "It's the only thing I didn't lose when she passed." Dorian leaned back, eyes thoughtful. You wear it like armor. It is, she whispered. In places like this, I need it. You're not alone anymore. That simple sentence, spoken without effort, without theatrics, nearly undid her. They sat in silence. 2 bowls of soup, 2 hearts slowly recognizing each other. Then Lila laughed suddenly, covering her mouth. What? He asked. I just remembered. I replied to Camille's email. Dorian raised a brow. I meant to forward it to myself, Layla said, blushing. Just to document it. Instead, I replied, to everyone. He blinked. What did you say? Her eyes sparkled. Just 5 words. He waited. Lila leaned in slightly and whispered, Don't mistake kindness for weakness. Dorian let out a low, genuine laugh, and she felt it in her bones. That's the most terrifying thing you've ever said, he murmured. I know, she grinned. I think I'm becoming dangerous. Then, as if the universe wanted to mark the moment, her phone buzzed again. She checked the screen. Her heart skipped. The Foundation's official social account had just posted a photo. Hers, windswept hair, tea in hand, sitting on the rooftop with her pendant visible and her eyes lifted toward the skyline. The caption read, Real strength looks like this. Empathy, integrity, vision. Meet the voice behind our future. And as she looked up from the screen, Dorian was already watching her, but not the way he had before. Lila had always walked through the office like background music, pleasant, steady, unnoticed unless needed. Until now. After the Foundation's post went live, everything changed, subtly, but undeniably. People looked up when she entered the room. Co-workers she barely knew complimented her scarf, her voice, her presence. One of the VPs from finance even said, Didn't realize we had a poet hiding on the 12th floor. It should have felt validating. But Leela knew better. There's a difference between being seen and being studied. By Thursday, Camille had stopped smiling altogether. At lunch, she walked past Lila's table with 2 silent colleagues and dropped her voice just enough to be heard. 15 minutes of fame is longer than I expected. Lila didn't react. She just sipped her soup, fingers brushing the pendant against her chest like a quiet promise. She was still here, and she wasn't disappearing. That afternoon, she found herself alone in the office kitchen, pouring hot water over a chamomile tea bag. When the door opened, Dorian stepped inside. No words. No tension. Just him. Shirt sleeves rolled, eyes tired, thoughtful. She didn't look up until he was beside her, reaching for a mug of his own. He spoke first. I can't tell if you're enjoying the attention or surviving it. She exhaled a small laugh. A little of both. You're handling it well. I keep telling myself I didn't ask for it. That helps. He nodded slowly. Still, you earned it. Lila looked up. That almost sounds like approval. More like recognition. There it was again, that soft gravity between them. Not flirtation, not performance. Just a sense that they'd somehow found each other in the middle of 1,000 unwritten rules. She glanced down. I'm still not used to it. The visibility. I am, he said, and I envy the way you carry it. She smiled faintly. You think I carry it well. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached out, not to touch her, but to lightly lift the chain of her necklace, letting the pendant fall into view. I think whoever gave you this knew exactly who you'd become. Her breath caught. No one had ever held it before, not even as gently as this. She looked at him, heart pounding, but just then the door flew open. Sorry, a junior assistant blurted, eyes wide as she froze in the doorway. Didn't mean to. Oh. Wow. She backed out immediately, cheeks blazing. Lila and Dorian both stepped apart, as if caught in something they hadn't named yet. Dorian cleared his throat. Well, I should get back. She nodded, still holding the pendant where he'd touched it. He paused at the door. Let me know if you need backup. For any future character assassinations, Layla smiled. Thanks. I think I've got a few sharp words in my pocket now. Good. He hesitated, then more softly, You don't need to prove you belong anymore. She watched him leave, pulse racing, not because of the attention, but because he had noticed her pendant before he ever touched it. And something about the way he said, Whoever gave you this, it didn't feel rhetorical. Later that night, Lila was curled on her sofa with a mug of peppermint tea, blanket over her lap, and the pendant resting warm against her skin. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number? She almost ignored it, but something made her answer. Hello? A beat of silence, then a woman's voice. Raspy, low, older than she remembered. Lila? Her stomach dropped. Aunt Mara? I wasn't sure this number still worked, the voice said. I haven't heard from you in years. I know, Mara said, and I'm sorry. But I saw your picture, the foundation post. That pendant, it was your mother's, Lila swallowed. Yes. She used to say it would find its way back to the right story. Lila closed her eyes. The room suddenly felt too quiet. I'd like to see you, Mara added, if that's something you'd want. Lila hesitated, heart full of emotion she hadn't sorted in a decade. I don't know what I want, she whispered. I live nearby now, still in the city. I could come to your office. Just a coffee, no pressure. Lila said nothing for a moment, then looked down at the pendant resting in her hand. I'm at Vail International, 11th floor, tomorrow, noon? A pause on the other end. Pause. Same stubborn heart, Mara said softly. When Lila hung up, she sat in the dark for a long while, and for the first time in years, her mother didn't feel so far away. Lila sat in the sunlit lounge of the 11th floor, her fingers gently rolling the pendant back and forth across her palm, like a worry stone. Noon. She hadn't seen Aunt Mara in almost 8 years. Not since the funeral, not since the fight, not since she'd said words she regretted the moment they left her mouth, words she thought time would erase, but instead had engraved between them like stone. The elevator pinged softly. Lila stood. Isla. And there she was. Mara looked older, thinner, but her eyes, slate gray, sharp and sorrowful, were the same. She carried a small paper bag in one hand and a bouquet of white gardenias in the other. I wasn't sure if flowers were too much, Mara said quietly. They're perfect, Lila replied. They sat near the window. There were no apologies at first, no tears, just tea and silence and the kind of breathing that people do when they're not sure where to begin. Mara broke it first. You wear it every day? Lila nodded, touching the pendant. I kept it after the will was read. I wasn't supposed to, I know. No, Mara said. You were, Lila blinked. I found something, Mara said, pulling a folded page from her coat pocket. Tucked inside one of your mother's old recipe books. She slid it across the table. Lila opened it. Familiar handwriting. If anything happens to me, I want Layla to have the necklace. She understands what it means to hold on to something delicate. Lila's throat closed. I thought you blamed me, she whispered. I blamed grief, Mara replied, but I was too proud to admit it. They sat in silence again, but this time it wasn't sharp, it was healing. I saw your picture, Mara said softly. The rooftop, the pendant, and I thought, she became exactly who her mother dreamed she'd be. Layla smiled, barely. But it was real. She still shows up, Lila said, in strange moments, like wind through an open window. She always said you'd be her voice, Mara murmured. I'm trying. They held each other's gaze, and in that quiet moment, the ache that had followed Lila for years shifted, not gone, but lighter. Carried, not buried. Later that afternoon, Helena appeared at Lila's desk like a kind breeze. I saw her, she said, motioning toward the lounge. You look softer, Lila smiled. I feel like I aged 5 years and went back 20 all in the same hour. That's called remembering who you are. Helena sat on the edge of the desk, elegant as always. You know, she said, I wore a pendant like that once. Lila tilted her head. A single ruby, very small, very bold. My grandmother's. What happened to it? I gave it to my son's nanny when she left to care for her ailing sister. I knew she'd wear it better than I did. She paused. Sometimes the most important things we pass on aren't heirlooms. They're stories. Lila touched the pendant lightly. It feels heavier lately. That's because it's full now, Helena smiled. Full of everything you've carried and everything you're finally letting go. Lila felt a lump rise in her throat, but not from pain. From something deeper, like gratitude with roots. You always know what to say, she murmured. Helena winked. That's what we're for, women with a few extra seasons behind us. That evening, Lila stayed late. The office had emptied, the city outside glowing with early evening light. She was at her desk, editing the gala copy when a voice broke the quiet. Still working? She looked up. Dorian stood in the doorway, no jacket, sleeves rolled, holding 2 mugs of tea. I'm not a tea person, he said, walking in, but apparently this one has lavender and something called oat blossom. Feels like it should fix a bad week, she laughed. I think that's mostly marketing. He sat across from her and handed her the mug. I heard about your visitor. Lila blinked. Helena? No, the other one, your aunt. Oh. I didn't mean to ask, I saw the guest log. She nodded, taking a sip. It was hard, but good. He didn't say anything. Just looked at her. Really looked. She left me something, Lila said. A note from my mother, from before she passed. Do you want to share it? I don't know, she whispered. Maybe not yet. He nodded. You don't owe anyone your story, Lila. Not even me. Her name in his voice, gentle, steady, felt like warmth through glass. I'm glad she came, he added. Me too, she said softly. It made me feel like I still have roots. Somewhere. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, tea untouched. You do? He said. Whether you see them or not. She looked at him for a long moment, then reached for her necklace and gently unclasped it. She set it down on the desk between them. He froze. I want you to see this, she said, not because it's valuable, but because it's the one thing I've never let anyone hold. He stared at it, then at her, then picked it up with a kind of reverence, like it was something alive. He turned it in his fingers once. I can see why she gave it to you. And just as he looked up, eyes deeper than they had any right to be, her phone buzzed. She checked the screen and frowned. Is everything okay? Dorian asked. Lila's face changed. It's from our campaign analytics team, she said. Apparently, someone's leaked a preliminary draft of the spring gala speech. His eyes sharpened. What? They're saying it's been shared outside the company. Dorian stood immediately. Show me. She opened the file. Her stomach turned. There it was, the second draft. Her voice, her words, leaked. And under the draft, in bold text, written by Lila Hartman for CEO use only. The next morning, Lila sat in the boardroom, not at the edge of the table like usual, but in the middle. Her name card had been placed 2 seats down from Dorian's. The leaked draft had traveled faster than expected. By noon, it had made its way to 3 partner agencies and a journalist at Business Current, who had already emailed a smug request for a quote. There was no doubt now someone had accessed her private files, and someone wanted her name attached to an unfinished speech. Helena arrived first, dressed in pale gray, hair in a soft bun, expression unreadable. She took one look at Lila and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder before sitting beside her. Silent. Strong. Dorian arrived last. He didn't sit. He stood at the front of the room and said, There's been a breach. No slides, no jargon, just those words. The language leaked yesterday, he continued, was a second draft document. It wasn't final, it wasn't approved, and it was meant for internal eyes only. The writer, Miss Hartman, is not responsible for its circulation, he He paused. Whoever leaked it did so deliberately, and we will find out who. There was a rustle of papers, shifts in chairs, but Lila didn't shrink. She didn't smooth her hair or tug at her sleeves like she used to in meetings like this. She sat still, eyes forward, the pendant warm against her chest. A quiet anchor in a storm of polished suits and silent accusations. Dorian's gaze met hers. Not pity, not panic, just something steady. After the meeting, the room cleared slowly. Lila stayed seated, mentally replaying everything that had been said. Every eye that had slid toward her, every half-hearted expression of concern. Dorian returned minutes later, jaw tight, a folder under his arm. Security's narrowing access logs, he said. It wasn't a tech error. Someone sent that file on purpose. The investigation stretched over the next few days, revealing small pieces of truth, one slow hour at a time, the kind of waiting that frays nerves and sharpens instincts. When the dust finally began to settle, Lila felt the shift before anyone said a word. That it would happen to you. She blinked. Why not? Because, he said quietly, you write like someone who believes in people. She looked down. Maybe that's my flaw. No, he said, that's your weapon. Then he pulled something from his pocket. A small flat velvet pouch. He handed it to her. Lila frowned, opening it. Inside was a thin silver chain, simple, elegant, new. It's for the pendant, Dorian said. Your old chain looked fragile. I thought maybe it deserved something stronger. Her breath caught. You didn't have to. I wanted to. She held the chain in her palm. It sparkled faintly in the light. Her fingers brushed the clasp. I haven't changed the chain since I was 19, she said. I thought if I did, it would mean letting something go. Dorian stepped closer. Maybe it means you're carrying it forward, he said, not clinging, choosing. She looked up at him, and for the first time saw not the CEO, not the careful man in the tuxedo, but someone trying, quietly, to earn her trust, one gesture at a time. She nodded. Thank you, she whispered. That evening, Lila was called back upstairs. Only this time, it wasn't a meeting. It was a request from Helena. Come, she'd said on the phone. I want you to see something. Lila entered the foundation gallery, a long, elegant corridor filled with photographs from their global campaigns. New portraits had been added. And at the far end, near the newest installation, stood a large, backlit frame. Her breath caught. It was her photo, again. But this time, it wasn't the rooftop image. It was one taken that morning, after the board meeting. Someone had captured her exiting the boardroom, face calm, spine straight. The pendant clearly visible. Below it, a small caption. When they tried to shake her, she stood still. She turned. Helena stood nearby, watching. I asked our media team to release it to our internal staff this week, Helena said, and next month to donors. Lila stared at the image. Why? Because, Helena said gently. They need to know who's leading this story now, and it's not whoever leaked that file. Lila looked down, blinking fast. I thought being quiet made me safe, she whispered. It made you invisible, Helena said, but not anymore. They stood in silence for a long moment. Then Helena asked softly, Have you told him? Told him what? That you're afraid, she said. That part of you still feels like that girl at the gala, clutching cider and pretending not to care. Lila didn't answer, because she didn't have to. She left the building late. Night had fallen. Wind was rising. The city glowed. And people moved around her like currents. She clutched her coat tighter and touched the chain at her neck. Not the old one, the new one. Dorian's. Her mother's pendant gleamed faintly beneath the streetlights. She looked up toward the office windows, one light still on, his. She almost turned around. Almost. But her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number, just one line. You're not done paying for this, princess. She froze. Read it again. No signature. no name. But deep down, Lila knew. This wasn't random. This wasn't over. The message haunted her the entire night. "You're not done paying for this." "Princess." It wasn't Camille. The tone was wrong. Camille was polished, cruel in designer heels. This was bitter, intimate. Layla couldn't sleep. She sat on her couch until the sky began to shift, thinking through every file, every draft, every login. She kept seeing one face, Grace, not Camille. Not a rival, not even someone important on the org chart. Just Grace Holloway, her quiet teammate from the copy team. They had once shared granola bars and deadline breakdowns. Grace had access to her folder, and she had not spoken to her since the leak. It didn't make sense, until it did. By mid-morning, she had her answer. The IT director confirmed it. Access logs, email traces, print queue metadata. Grace had downloaded Lila's second draft from the internal server 2 days ago and sent it from her personal email, not just to a journalist, but to her ex-boyfriend, a blogger who specialized in CEO gossip. Lila stood outside the HR office holding the printout of the logs, hand trembling. She didn't feel angry, she felt heavy. "You trusted her," said a voice behind her. She turned. "Dorian?" "How long have you known?" he asked. "Since last night," she whispered. "She sent you the message, didn't she?" Lila nodded once. "I didn't want to believe it." Dorian stepped closer. "We're handling it. The official review starts today, but I want to make something clear." He looked at her, steady, unflinching. "You're not going anywhere." Lila blinked. "I wasn't sure you'd want me to stay." He smiled softly. "You're the reason I stayed." That stilled her breath. "I don't just mean the campaign," he added. "I mean this version of the company, the version that's becoming something better than just polished suits and bullet points." She didn't trust her voice enough to speak. He held her gaze, then gestured toward the small bench beside the windows. "Come with me," he said. 5 minutes." They sat in silence for a moment, the kind that felt safe. Then Dorian reached into his coat again, same inner pocket, and pulled out a small square box. She stared. "I'm not proposing," he said quickly, with the faintest laugh. "I wasn't assuming," she replied, though her heart had definitely skipped. He opened the box. Inside was a jewelry cloth, folded into a triangle, soft and worn. He lifted it, revealing the original chain, her old one. "It broke when I tried to fit the pendant onto the new one," he admitted. "I took it to a restorer. They cleaned it, reinforced it, said it was surprisingly strong for its age." Lila stared down at it, her breath caught somewhere between memory and meaning. "I thought about replacing it," he said, "but something told me you might not be ready." "I'm not sure what to do with it," she whispered. He nodded. "That's the thing about what we carry. Sometimes it's not about letting go. Sometimes it's about learning to hold it differently." She ran her thumb along the chain, then did something she hadn't expected. She unhooked the pendant from the new chain, the one he had gifted, and carefully threaded it back onto the restored one. She clasped it behind her neck, her hands shaking slightly. The old chain carried too much history to be replaced, and now, strengthened and restored, it felt like something that could hold her without breaking. Dorian watched her in silence. "It's not about choosing old or new," she said. "It's about remembering that both have weight." "And value," he added softly. Their eyes locked. Then, because something inside her finally gave permission, Lila reached out and touched his wrist, not dramatically, not with urgency. Just a simple, human connection. "Thank you," she said, "for not fixing me, just seeing me." His fingers turned, brushing hers. Then he leaned in, slowly, not for a kiss, just until their foreheads nearly touched. It was more intimate than anything else could have been, a silence full of what-ifs, maybes, and quiet yeses. And then a loud, clumsy clatter from the hallway. They jolted apart like teenagers. "Sorry," a voice called from around the corner. "Someone left a box of donation books on the floor, and I tripped." They both laughed, startled, breathless, and entirely aware of the spell that had been broken. Dorian stood. "Later tonight, foundation dinner, sit near me?" Lila nodded. "Yes, but I'm not writing your speech again." He smirked. "Wouldn't dare." That evening the foundation dinner was a blur of chandeliers and string quartets. But Lila wasn't in the corner. She wasn't watching from the sidelines. She walked in beside Helena, confident and calm, wearing a soft navy gown and the pendant resting on her newly restored chain, like armor, like grace. Dorian was already there. And when their eyes met, something unspoken passed between them. He crossed the room to her and didn't stop walking until he was standing just beside her. Not in front of her, not behind. Beside, where equals stand. He offered her a glass of water. "Still peppermint?" he asked. She laughed. "Still me." "Good," he said, "because I like her." But before she could respond, Helena appeared at her side. "Lila," she said, tone quiet, "may I have a word?" Lila followed her to the terrace doors. The city sparkled below. The air was crisp, clean. Helena's eyes softened. "There's something I didn't tell you," she said, "about your mother. She wrote to me years ago, just once." Helena reached into her purse and pulled out a folded, yellowed envelope. "I found it again last week," she said. "I wasn't sure when to give it to you. I kept it for years, unsure if I had the strength to give it to you, or if we would ever be close enough for it to mean what your mother intended." Lila took it, hands trembling. No return address, just her name, Lila, written in familiar, beautiful handwriting. She stared at it, heart pounding. "I haven't opened it," Helena said. "That choice is yours." Lila swallowed hard, and just as she slipped her finger under the flap, a voice behind them said coldly, "Should have known you'd need a legacy handed to you, Hartman." Lila turned. Grace, in a dark dress, arms folded. She wasn't done, not even close. The letter trembled in Lila's hands, but her eyes weren't on the envelope anymore. They were on Grace, standing under the soft terrace lights, jaw tight, voice low with resentment. "I worked longer than you," Grace said, "harder, and no one ever noticed." Lila didn't flinch. "I saw the way you were treated," she replied softly. "But I wasn't the one who ignored you." "You smiled your way to the top," Grace spat, "and then pretended like you didn't belong there." "No," Lila said. "I fought to believe I belonged there, even when no one said it out loud." Grace's arms dropped. "Just slightly." "I trusted you," Lila added, "and I'm not angry you wanted to be seen. I'm angry you thought you had to erase me to do it." A silence passed between them, not heavy, not hostile, just true. "I never had a pendant," Grace said bitterly. "No mother writing letters, no family to lift me." Lila stepped closer. "You don't need someone to hand you your worth," she said gently, "but hurting someone else doesn't build it either." Grace didn't speak, didn't cry. She just nodded once, stiffly, and walked away into the ballroom, where the weight of her choices would meet her soon enough. Lila stayed outside, the envelope still in her hand. She sat on the edge of a stone planter, heart thudding. Dorian appeared quietly beside her, not asking, not speaking, just being there. "I should read it alone," she said. "I know." She looked at him. His eyes were calm and full, not with pity, with love. "I'll be right inside," he said. "Don't wait too long. Dessert's bread pudding." She laughed too softly for the moment, but it was real. When she was finally alone, she opened the envelope. Her mother's handwriting curved across the page like a melody she hadn't heard in years. "Lila, if you're reading this, it means I'm not there beside you. But I want you to know I never really left. This necklace, it's not just mine, it's ours. I wore it to remind myself I had something worth holding on to, and now I'm passing that weight to you, not to burden you, to ground you. You will become more than I ever imagined, Lila. Not because of your beauty, your kindness, or your strength, but because you will carry people with your words. And one day, someone will see you standing in a crowded room and know exactly who you are. And when he does, don't look away. You were made to be seen. Love always, Mum Lila sat there weeping softly into the quiet air, not from grief, from something much deeper. She touched the pendant at her chest, and for the first time, it didn't feel heavy. It felt whole. Later, back inside, she found Dorian by the dessert table. He held out a small plate. "Bread pudding," he said. "1 spoon." "You remembered? You said it once, 3 weeks ago." "Right after I asked if we had oat milk," she smiled, setting down her clutch and taking the plate. They shared it at the edge of the room, watching the city twinkle like a painting. "You okay?" he asked. Lila nodded. "Better than I've been in years." He waited a beat. Then, "I've never been good at timing. Or people. Or whatever this is between us." She looked up, curious. "But I know what I want now," he added. And his hand found hers, not as a question, but as an answer. "I'm not perfect," he said, "but I see you. And I want this, you, not because of a pendant or a speech or how you carry a room without knowing it, but because of how you make me feel like I could be someone better just by standing beside you." Lila's eyes filled again, but this time she didn't blink them away. "I've been waiting for someone to choose me," she whispered. "I'm not just choosing," he said. "I'm committing." Then, quietly, intentionally, he kissed her. It wasn't rushed, it wasn't dramatic. It was everything she had waited for, and in that moment, held in the way he saw her, Lila understood she would never again be the invisible girl standing alone in a crowded room. Every silent wish, every New Year's Eve where she stood alone with a plastic cup, wondering if love had forgotten her. And now, under crystal lights and a sea of music, it had found her, fully. They left the event late, just the two of them. The months that followed were quiet and steady, shared work, late-night conversations, and moments that deepened everything they had not yet dared to name. Nothing rushed, nothing forced, just something real growing slowly between them. Helena watched from across the room as they walked toward the elevators, side by side, her hand tucked in his, the pendant resting against her heart. She smiled to herself and whispered, "Finally." But for Dorian, that night wasn't quite over. In the quiet of the car ride home, Lila leaned her head against the window, peaceful, thoughtful, her hand still holding his. In the days that followed, every conversation between them seemed to open a new door, quiet moments that deepened what had begun long before the first kiss. And Dorian, who had never rushed anything in his life, found himself certain he didn't want to wait to build something real with her. He reached into his coat pocket, not rushed, not rehearsed, just ready. "I should have brought this earlier," he said. Lila turned surprised, and he held out a small velvet box. Inside, a delicate silver ring, simple, timeless, with a tiny sapphire set at the center. The exact shade her eyes turned when she smiled under soft light. "I don't want to waste time," he said. "I want to build something sacred with you, with your name, with a home, with a promise everyone can see." Lila blinked, already trembling. "Are you asking—" "Lila Hartman," he said gently, "will you marry me?" She didn't answer right away because her throat was too full. But then she nodded, fast and sure. "Yes, yes, of course I will." He slipped the ring onto her finger. She touched the pendant at her neck. And for a moment, it shimmered like a bridge between her past and everything ahead. No spotlight, no performance, just the quiet certainty of choosing each other. They married 6 weeks later under a blooming tree in Helena's garden. Just close family, no microphones, no grand gestures, only 2 hands, 1 promise, and the kind of silence that feels holy. When Dorian said her name, Leila Vale. She cried for the first time in front of him, and when she said, "I do," the pendant on her chest shimmered in the morning sun, no longer a weight from the past, but a blessing carried forward. 2 years later, now they lived in a sunlit home just outside the city. Leila Vale. That was how the envelope was addressed when the final approval letter arrived from the adoption agency. She opened it on a Sunday morning, still in her robe, toast forgotten on the plate, heart full. Dorian stood behind her, arms wrapped around her waist, chin on her shoulder. "She's coming home," Leila whispered. "We're going to be parents." They spent the afternoon preparing the nursery. Not perfect, not Pinterest-worthy, but full of soft toys, warm blankets, and love. Later, they shared a quiet dinner on the porch, homemade soup, bread, and a small bowl of strawberries for dessert. "You still wear the pendant," Dorian said, brushing his thumb along her collarbone. "It reminds me I was strong before you," she said softly, "but now I'm strong with you." He nodded, kissed her forehead. "Our daughter's going to know what love looks like." "Because she'll see it," Leila smiled, "every day." And she would. Because Leila and Dorian built their love with honor, intention, and forever in mind. Not in the shadows, but in the light of a promise made and kept. Sometimes what begins with a whisper becomes a vow, not because we needed rescuing, but because we finally became whole enough to choose love that lasts. Do you believe love means committing, not just in the heart, but in name, in home, and in life? Tell me in the comments. I read every one. And if this story touched you, please like, subscribe, and rate it from 0 to 10 below. See you in the next story.